Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is HawkCast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Hawkeye Beacon and Rivals.com. I'm your lead analyst and host, Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by managing editor Ross Binder and publisher Adam Jacoby. Before we get started, you're watching on YouTube. Make sure you drop that like, drop a comment, and hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And boy, oh boy, folks, do we have a deal for you. We talk about subscribing to iowa.rivals.com/subscribe, right? And we talk about that on the podcast. Right now, going through, is it Sunday morning or Sunday or Monday?
Going through December 2nd.
Oh, okay. Well,
So
so
it's a
we got a little
5-day sale. Yep.
5 day sale, limited time offer. You gotta hop on this. 75% off the entire year with promo code RIVALS24. RIVALS24, all caps. We also have the autofill link, which will be in the description here on YouTube. It's right there, right at the top, and on Apple Podcasts and Spotify for that matter. You just go to the description and the link will be right there. Super quick autofill link. You just sign up there and you'll get all our premium content and intel for 75% off the entire year. So take advantage of that today. We got signing day, we got the portal, we got the throes of basketball season for men and women, and of course, bowl season right around the corner.
Yeah, and this is the deepest discount of the year on rivals.com. And when you get this membership, you're not only getting Hawkeye Beacon, you're not only getting everything that we offer for Iowa, but every single premium article on the Rivals Network is going to be available to you for, again, 75% off for the entire year. I told them don't do this. I told them we are going to lose so much money doing this. And yet they said, no, we are doing 75% off for Black Friday. And so that is going to be available to you. Promo code RIVALS24. And again, new subscribers only. It is available through December 2nd. And there's even ways for, on days like this, you can even buy the premium add-on where you can access every single team's premium message board. And I'm just gonna speculate here, guys. I would say that Nebraska message board is a little spicy today, a little spicy this morning. And if you want to be a premium subscriber and wash in the Schadenfreude, this is your opportunity to do it for 75% off plus the universal add-on to enjoy everything on the Rivals Network. Click in, lock in, join us.
If you're already a premium subscriber, go over and check out InsideNebraska.com. I'm sure I'm sure the Cornhusker fans are having a good Saturday here at the end of November. So with that said, we got to hop in. Drew Stevens, 53-yard field goal to win as time expires, 13-10 again. Year later, after Marshall Meter hits the game winner, after Drew Stevens gets benched, what a redemption arc! What a story! I mean, Ross, in our pregame pod, I said, I'm from Iowa. I'm obligated to hate Nebraska, and it was just almost poetic justice to for a lot of reasons, right? It was just really, I think a lot of people are going to take away like the sportsmanship stuff from this game, and of course we got to talk about that. But for Drew Stevens to get benched after missing two chip shots, 24 and I think 30 yards, something like that against Nebraska last year, and to hit this game-winning field goal, man, talk about poetic justice.
Yeah, I mean, from a storyline perspective, like if this was a movie, like someone would say, "Oh, this is a little too, on the nose," right? I mean, literally a year ago, Drew Stevens basically has the kicking yips. Like he's missing short kicks. He's just, really struggling. Like you said, he gets benched for that game-winning kick against Nebraska exactly a year ago. Marshall Meter comes in, hits the kick. He's the hero. Drew Stevens is, not, but he stays, sticks around, does the work, does the labor, and gets a lot better. He regains his consistency, gets over the yips, and has been really good this year. And he's been really good lately. Last week he makes 5 field goals in a pretty windy situation. Like that stadium the wind was whipping around in Maryland last week, but he was on the money. And then this week he makes 2 field goals, and the second one, of course, is the one we're all going to remember. That's the 53-yard game winner, frigid cold, time expiring. And yeah, I mean, just total redemption for him from a year ago. Just an unbelievable, story arc, and so good for him too. Like we've been able to talk to him this year and before that, and he's a good dude, and it's nice to see this happen for him after especially what he went through last year. And it's uncanny how similar this game was to last year's game. Like truly uncanny, like down to identical scores, not identical game-winning kicks, but walk-off kicks in both of them, both times precipitated by the defense, making a great play out of kind of nowhere to set up the kicks.
A defensive end doing that, no less. Not just the defense, but both times it was a defensive end and a backup defensive end at that. Because Herkett wasn't starting last year. That is how close that this parallels itself. Keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Ethan Herkett last year, Max Llewellyn this year. Like it's truly eerie. Like just how much this echoes last year. Like if I was Nebraska fans, I'd be like, did we fall into like Groundhog Day or something? Like this is just nuts.
The only way that this could have been worse for Nebraska fans is if bowl eligibility had been on the line. So at the very least, they are going back to a bowl. They've broken that streak. So it's just wounded pride over there in Lincoln. And I get it. I completely get it, because that's a tough way to lose. And on the flip side, it's a great way for Iowa to win, because so much of that first half was predicated on things not going as planned, right? So much was, like not getting the offense in gear, not being able to get, Jackson Stratton in gear. And, Jay even mentioned after the game, and we'll talk about the sportsmanship later, but, he was like, imagine how good Nebraska felt at halftime. They're up 10-0, hadn't shaken our hands. They're probably this, blah, blah, blah. Iowa stayed the course. Iowa, played the more disciplined game down the stretch, very obviously. Iowa was not the team making mistakes in clutch when it mattered. And you can point to several for Nebraska. And that was, again, a mirror to last year in a lot of ways. And so, from a Nebraska standpoint, you're probably thinking, like you said, Ross, why are we doing this again? Here we go. This, I'm tired of reading the script, et cetera, et cetera. But, ultimately, I think what it comes down to is just program discipline. And Iowa has been hanging its hat on that for the last quarter century. And there's really no reason to believe that Nebraska's got it on that same level yet. And there's no amount of, handshaking and posturing and pregame this and that's going to, make up for the fact that Nebraska does not take care of the details the way that Iowa does.
And Drew Stevens made that very clear a couple different times. What did he say post game? He said, "At Iowa, we don't muff punts." That was one big thing, and
he said, "I don't know how Nebraska does it, but at Iowa, we don't muff punts."
There you go.
He was rolling last night.
Yeah, he was on one, as was everybody else. And I mean, okay, these are the two storylines, right? Is the kick and why don't we just get right into the sportsmanship? Okay, if you somehow missed it on Twitter, Jay Higgins, first thing he said, and when he came into post game interviews, was that the captains didn't.
I was gonna say, just to set this up, he came in, he had like an opening statement to give out to the media. Like it wasn't like prompted by a question from any reporters. Like he just had this on his mind and wanted to get it out.
Jumped right into it. Talked for like a minute or two.
Yeah, a couple minutes.
And then Nick walked over.
Yeah, right. So Jay comes in and shares with media that the captains at Nebraska didn't shake hands prior to the game. He'd never experienced that. He said maybe in Pee Wee football sometime, and said that right when that happened, he knew Iowa won the game. And additionally, said that Matt Rhule walked through Iowa's warmups in the middle of the, or yeah, prior to the game. And now I know there's some talk on Twitter. Mitch Fick got a video of Matt Rhule walking the around the field in shorts and a t-shirt, or sorry, shorts and a long sleeve shirt. But just because Mitch Fick got that clip doesn't mean that's the clip that the players are referring to. One. And two, I didn't see it. I didn't see Matt Rhule walk through the warm-ups. So maybe this is an MJ situation where they're creating a narrative to go out. But at the same time, I see you shaking your head, Adam. And I just say that for benefit of the doubt, right? That's the only reason I say that. Jay and Nick don't strike me as individuals who would make up that narrative and then tell the media about it, right?
Yeah, and Nick, sorry, just to interrupt real quick, but like Nick, when he came over in the middle of Jay's session, was like, "Oh yeah, did you tell him about Coach Rhule?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I already told him about that." Like it was clearly eating at them for a while, and that's not really the way that you roll out a smear campaign. And yeah, Eliot, like you said, they're not the kind of dudes to do that at all. They are at the opposite end of the spectrum. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
That was the gist of it. I thought of I just had a moment this morning where I saw a little bit of Nebraska Twitter and I was like, okay, nobody really saw it or got it on video. Like, fair enough, all right. But again, at the same time, Jay does not strike me as an individual who would go and make that up. And I'm not one to say, oh, classic Nebraska, they all are pieces of crap. I just thought that. It's just a little silly, and we'll talk about not shaking hands. That's what I want to start with. I think it's a little silly, and I think it's a little immature, especially when you're a six-win football team, and you just qualified for your first bowl for the first time in 8 years, and they just got it.
Yeah.
They just got it. You know, you can talk during the game, right? You can talk after the game. You can celebrate when you score. You can celebrate when you get a sack. There's just a certain level of, and I don't think we often refer to sportsmanship at this level for a lot of reasons. Sportsmanship is something you talk about with young kids or high school kids. But for this to be a factor in this game, especially after Iowa's won 9 of 10 now, it's just a little silly, right? Like, what are we
I,
doing? Wait, these are
I-
these are college kids, right? Like, I definitely want to give kids the benefit of the doubt more often than not when they're in college, right? We don't tend to really go after players or anything like that because they are 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 year olds. For let's just assume Jay was being honest because it's easy to assume Jay's being honest. Um, for Rhule to do that, and Adam, you and I said this in the press box. Matt Rhule was a coach that I was like, that seems, and I don't know a ton of Matt Rhule lore, but he just seems like a straightforward, this is how we do it, we respect the opponent kind of coach. And assuming he did walk through the warm-ups, like it's just unnecessary disrespect. And I don't know if I'm assuming it was an attempt to get his players riled up, right? Like, I'm in this with you, and I can understand that to a degree. But then going out there and not shaking hands, um, I think the appropriate word is silly.
Well, and college football is eminently a silly and immature sport, right?
Like, well,
This is we were talking about a circus of like unseriousness just to begin with, right? But also we should also sort of predicate all of this sort of sportsmanship and shaking hands and this and that with the fact that when Nebraska got off the bus, the first thing they did was come down to the field and try to get to the 50-yard line and the Tiger Hawk and all that. And there were 6 Iowa troopers waiting on the Tiger Hawk to keep the Huskers off of it. And I know that there were some Nebraska fans certainly on Twitter who were like, "You disrespected the pregame routine. These kids were going to pray," and so now we're getting into like outright heresy, right? Like these are crimes against God, guys. But also, but also, if your conditions of victory are predicated on praying at the 50-yard line instead of the 40-yard line. Like things are a little bit fragile at that point. Like you're stacking a few too many China plates.
You know, I'm part of a church league in slow pitch softball, and what we do after every game is pray. And some of the old guys wouldn't start praying until I took my hat off. I was like, Jesus can't hear you if you have your hat on. So Jesus clearly can't hear you at Nebraska if you're on the 40-yard line.
Yeah, to me, especially the handshake thing, like that just says to me like how much Iowa is in their heads. Like how much Iowa is this whole program is living rent free in Nebraska's heads, and just it eats at them that they've lost 9 of 10. It kills them that they've lost 4 walk-off wins to Iowa in the last 6 years. I think it is 7 years. And like this program that they so desperately want to be better than, that keeps beating them. And so they are just incredibly frustrated by it and expressing that through just some very extreme pettiness. And I support pettiness generally, but it's like, come on, guys, this is Bush League.
It's
Yeah. So a couple quick things on that, Ross. Yeah, a whole lot of this Nebraska superiority is predicated on, superiority. And so when you hang your hat on multiple national titles, the last thing that you want to confront is Iowa winning 9 of 10 against your team. That is and we're talking about zero like BCS era, bowl era, this, that national championship Iowa. And so there's this increasing incongruency between like, well, but we're supposed to be Nebraska, and well, but Nebraska is a 5-6 win program right now. And when
for
you are
almost a
having
decade.
yeah, and when you're having trouble squaring those two things, you start to get, sort of angry at the things that you can't control, like where you pray on the football field. And Eliot, yeah, like I played football in high school and for one bad year in D3, and we prayed after and before games too. Like that's part of the whole thing. And I think this is going to be a HawkCast verse, but I'm actually going to quote a Bible verse here. But Matthew 6:6 says, but thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. Now, guys,
Mm.
I don't know how many closets are at the 50-yard line of Kinnick Stadium, but the entire point was don't make a show of it, right? Like use your faith privately, right? Like that is your connection with your faith is an intensely private thing. And to, sort of turn it into a public spectacle that must not be, that is sort of a perversion of it. So that I would caution Nebraska fans is as long as we're invoking the name of the Lord here. Like I'm not quite sure that your snow is pure driven white on this one. This is posturing. This is pettiness. This is college football in a nutshell. This is well, you messed with this detail, I'm going to mess with this. Like, this is a rivalry. This is a sibling rivalry at that. Like, this is good and spicy. And I would say it is one of the spiciest rivalry situations we've seen in Iowa City in a long time, maybe even the Ferentz era. Ross, would you agree with that?
I was trying to think of one that has been spicier, and I feel like there's been a little back and forth with Minnesota sometimes, and some stuff with Iowa State here and there. But this one feels like it's bubbling over more than anything I can recall in the past, for sure. Like this is gonna get it already is, very spicy.
Yeah, so like most of the like spiciness that we've seen in the Ferentz era has been a lot like coach led, right? Like we know when Kirk doesn't like a certain coach. This feels like the first time when the leash has been off the players in sniping at other teams and this and that. And so that's what like this feels like Hayden Fry era Iowa. This feels like old school college football, like what made the
This
sport great to begin with.
this feels like Brett Bielema taunting Northwestern kind of when he was at Iowa.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the Iowa equivalent of Miami and FSU going after each other. Like it's definitely not South Florida here for a lot of reasons, but this is the Midwest version of that. Like this is Midwest sniping at each other.
What what I will add to that entire conversation regarding the shaking of hands and Jay Higgins, I referenced it. Jay Higgins said, "I knew we won the game right when they didn't shake our hands." What I mentioned it being silly. What it is to me is a level of insecurity in the program. You're not okay with yourself. You're not okay with things going on with the 6-win season, your first bowl appearance in 8 years, and I got to show you something because we haven't done it on the football field. I got to do something, and you don't do that. You don't think it's it it was immature and silly and insecure. All three
it's
of
it,
those words.
it's more of Nebraska losing at the little things
Yep.
yesterday too.
Yes.
Like they were
Mhm.
losing at the little things on the field, like especially in special teams. Bad snap, missed field goal, muffed punt, the strip sack at the end, and other things. And this is little things off the field. Like your mindset is not right. Your headspace is not right if this is the stuff that's bothering you right before game time. Like, and it's clear, like Iowa, like listening to all the Iowa guys that spoke after that game, like the only way Iowa or any team, but especially Iowa, because they're the only team that wins games in this bizarre ways like this. But you win games like that by being fully committed to what you're doing and truly believing in that you're going to find a way to win, that you're going to do this and doing all these little things right. And that's what this program has been built on under Ferentz. And last night was a classic example of them doing that, in my opinion.
Speaking of those little things, we have yet to talk about Max Llewellyn and the strip sack with 20 seconds to go. Max, you could tell he was convinced that he got the football. Adam, I don't know, Ross, I don't know what you were seeing on TV. The angles on the field on the big screen, I had no idea. I just thought it was one of those moments where Max was just trying to convince everybody he had the football, right? That's what it looked like. But
Live, that's what it looked like, absolutely, because it just looked like a sack. And when they started to run the replays, you could actually see that as soon as he brought that hand down, that the ball came loose. You just couldn't see on the replay who had, come up with it. And if they had kept that call as a Nebraska sack, clock runs out, that game was going to overtime. The fact that they changed it on the field to a fumble recovery by Iowa is the only reason that that replay supported Iowa. There was nothing conclusive about that replay at all.
Yeah, yeah, they went with what the call was on the field because there wasn't clear or indisputable evidence of what there was a clear fumble that was extremely clear from the replay, but who exactly recovered it and when, that was not wholly clear from the replays I saw. But Max came up with it. Max is what the ref said on the field, so they stayed with that after the replay, and obviously that uh, was exactly what Iowa needed.
the parallels that we mentioned, Ethan Hurkett with the pick, Max Llewellyn, like again, this is an issue of little details. Because you don't make either of those plays without knowing exactly what you're doing all the right things. Llewellyn said post game that he said, I've been beating him all day with speed. and I knew I could do it again. And he didn't use the signature spin. That would have been like an all-time moment, and it almost still is. For us to be talking about Llewellyn throughout the season, for him to make some of those really big plays and to get some QB hurries near sacks and just look like a future NFL defensive lineman at times. I mean, really, he did. He's a physical specimen. That spin move is nasty, and for it to culminate in this final game, that was cool for him. That was cool for him.
What's cool is also that he basically had that um, example right in front of him with Ethan Herkett. Because Herkett was a guy who, and even going past the remarkable parallels with last year's game, just broadly, Herkett was a guy who was not getting the start because he was behind a guy like Joe Evans, who you don't take out of the starting lineup, but he was, earning his way onto the field in clutch moments, like I don't know, the fourth quarter of the Nebraska game, like the last drive. And when you keep, putting in that work, when you keep competing and making the most of your opportunities, you get to make a play like Herkett's still insane interception. You get to make a play like Llewellyn's strip sack that only he recognized was a strip sack at a time, at that time. So yeah, it's and Kirk talks so much about development, wait your turn, next man in, right? Like earning your way up that ladder, and for there to be such a clear object example for Llewellyn in Herkett right in front of him, you're like just like what, a year or two ahead of him. Like that could not be more exactly what Kirk Ferentz talks about with the culture of the developmental program.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And good night, everybody.
Yeah, right. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, so one other, I don't know that we've even mentioned it once to this point. And it's funny. I wanted to make sure we reference this too. Is Adam, you and I at halftime, maybe partway through the third quarter, were like, I don't know what I'm gonna write. Like, what are we gonna do? And of course we get inundated with storylines in the final, what, 15, whatever it was, final 15, 20, 20-ish minutes. Kaleb Johnson, 72-yard touchdown pass from Jackson Stratton, I guess. What looked like a lateral. For him to make that play, man, send him to New York, dude. Like, that is a Heisman Trophy moment. And no, he's probably not going to win. It's probably going to be Travis Hunter or Ashton Genty or whoever. But send the guy to New York, dude. Like, he's probably not going to get the Doak Walker because that's probably going to go to Genty. Any other year, it's Kaleb Johnson's in a landslide. But he deserves a spot in New York, especially scored in every single game he played in this year. Nobody else on the field between Iowa and Nebraska makes that play. He broke 5, 6 tackles. There was a moment where,
Sometimes three at a time.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was just gonna say three different Cornhuskers were about to tackle him, and he sheds all of them and outruns the defense and scores. That was a phenomenal play. It got likened to Cooper's punt return against Minnesota by Kirk in the post game, and he said, "Well, this one counted," you know. That was incredible by Kaleb to make that play and a necessary play. I mean, I clearly Iowa doesn't win that game without that play by Kaleb Johnson, and I think it goes back to the little details, right? Because Iowa's not in that game if they don't have those little details, if they don't make those minor plays throughout it. I mean, largely it was 10-0. We were sitting in the press box like, okay, well, it was 10-3 at that point in time. They couldn't score when they got the ball on the 4-yard line, right? So it was just like, okay, I don't know how this is going to shake out. Bang, tie game. That was an unreal play by an NFL running back right there.
Yeah, I mean that play was just like, just like manifesting it into reality almost. Like he just pulls that out of absolutely nowhere. That play is almost half of Iowa's total offense for the entire game. Like, I think they had 164, and that was 72 yards. And there are just multiple points in that play where you can do like a freeze frame, and it's like, how did Kaleb Johnson score from here? Because there's like three Nebraska guys, all around him, or there's, someone like tugging at his arms or legs or something. It's like, oh yeah, and he scored after this point. Like, it's just one of the most preposterous plays. And, we've seen him have some incredible runs and plays this year. Obviously, he set the school record for touchdowns, just big play after big play. And, I think you can make a good case that this was his best play of the year. And again, that is a high bar that he has set this season, but this was an unbelievable play, all on him. I mean, it goes down as a passing touchdown for Stratton, but like he threw the ball like 5 yards sideways, and then Johnson gets it and does everything the rest of the way. I mean, the blocking was decent, but again, that was all him, like breaking tackles, getting to the edge, cutting, and then just using his speed in the open field. Like, you're going to see that play on a lot of highlight reels for the next 6 months. And you should, because it is an unreal play.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys mentioned the fact that that was probably a lateral and not a forward pass, even though it went down in the scorebooks as a forward pass. And I don't mention that for the fact of the statistical distinction, because I don't think that matters in any way. I mention it because Johnson had to reach back behind him to make that catch. And if that ball comes off his hands, if he is still exhibiting the receiver skills that he had as a freshman, let's say, all of a sudden we're not talking about a 10-10 game. We are talking about a ball bouncing God knows where near the sideline, deep in Iowa territory, with Iowa down by 7 and unable to move the ball in the fourth quarter. And at that point, you're trying to hang on for dear life. So not only does like Kaleb save disaster from starting, because I mean, I'm not saying this to pile on Stratton, but it was not an accurate throw. But then, like you said, he makes that individual play, and Kirk was borderline speechless at it after the game. And you mentioned the Cooper DeJean return. The parallel I saw was Tommy Frazier against Nebraska, or Tommy Frazier against Florida in that Orange Bowl, and I want to say '96. But that, for as much as that Tommy Frazier run, burying Steve Spurrier, the run gun, or the fun and gun, and I remember the headlines back then being "the fun is done." This felt like that same sort of, "Hey, Nebraska, this ain't your sport anymore." Like, get ready to learn women's basketball, buddy. This, or women's volleyball. That felt like there's a man on the field and he's not wearing red and white, right? That is the best player on the field, does not belong to you guys. And, an unbelievable individual effort, but also not even out of place for Kaleb Johnson. That was his 10th touchdown of more than 20 yards. 10 touchdowns from outside of the red zone is preposterous. And so when you say, Eliot, like, send him to New York, yeah, I'd like to see that too, but only because I want to see all of those like highlights one more time on national television. I want the rest of the nation to see what Kaleb Johnson has done this year, because these are highlight real, like, individual effort plays that I would say, yeah, like only Ashton Genty would be able to make, as far as anybody else in college football in these backfields right now. Like, it's Ashton and Kaleb are the best two running backs in college football, and I'm not sure who's third place. I just know that they're not close.
Omari and Hampton, maybe. These are names that I've heard mentioned in the Doak Walker conversation. I think there's another one out there. I can't remember, but
Yeah, that tells you everything.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I'm probably thinking NFL too, like Quinshawn Judkins and like the draft and such, but Johnson, Caleb, and Genty are in a class of their own, and I think last night was the epitome of it. He couldn't get anything going in the run game. He made something happen. He found a way to make something happen. I think that is the strongest point you have to make about his career and this season at Iowa.
Also, to that point, Iowa finally got him the ball in space,
Yep.
which I mean, there's only Caleb has been incredible this year. There's only so much he can do when you're just handing the ball off to him and expect having him run, into the line of scrimmage where there's already like 9 Nebraska guys within 5 yards of, the ball. It's like Caleb's amazing, but he can't teleport through guys. Like he's got to
Yet.
He'll work on that this offseason.
One thing that we started to notice near the end of the third quarter was that Caleb started to run away from contact, started to try to outrun guys to the corner. And Nebraska's too fast for that. Nebraska is too, I mean, their defense is too good for that. And, there was a point where it's like, oh, this is, Caleb's bad habits from his, underclassmen years starting to show up again. And what was notable about that touchdown that he broke? He initiated the contact. If you want to break a tackle, initiate the contact. That's one of the biggest things that Liddell Betts has been hammering on him all this year, going, even back to the last offseason. And when he was like, oh, yeah, I'm Kaleb Johnson, runs over dudes, breaks 6 tackles. And if he runs scared of them, he's not breaking those tackles. And yeah, that was a play that freshman Kaleb Johnson doesn't make. It's a play that sophomore Kaleb Johnson doesn't make. And it's a play that junior Kaleb Johnson makes. And that is the difference between Johnson being part of a running or a backfield by committee and being a Doak Walker finalist.
And that's the difference between a victory and a loss.
100%.
We're talking about like I just pulled up the stats. Nebraska had 334 yards of offense. Iowa 164. Nebraska 76 plays. Iowa 41. Passing. Nebraska 190. Iowa 115. Rushing. Nebraska 144. Iowa 49. Time of possession. Nebraska 39:01. Iowa 20:59. First downs. Nebraska 20. Iowa 5.
I believe the stat I saw was this is the first time since 2001 that a team had 5 first downs and still won the game. I think it was Arkansas over UNLV the time prior. But to do that to Nebraska is, I mean, only Iowa does that. Only Iowa does that.
I need to find the third down conversions. I believe Iowa was 0 of 10 as well.
Yeah, they did
were
not convert
10.
a first down.
Yeah.
Or a third down, rather.
All that
The
to go into our next portion of talking about the game. Jackson Stratton was fun while it lasted. We were talking about this last week, um, like he was gonna be a regular rotate, maybe not a regular rotation guy, but a guy who had a chance. And you know, I think what we learned yesterday is that Lester devised a really solid plan against Maryland, and Jackson executed it. Now going against a team that's really solid in Nebraska, like we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They do have a lot of talent, right? There's a lot of talent on that roster. Finishes 8 of 15 for 115 yards, and 72 of those 115 yards came on one play. I think the Stratton experiment is probably over. I think Iowa goes to Brendan Sullivan at the bowl game, and that's based on information that we've received that our premium subscribers have been privy to for a while. Which, by the way, you want to be a premium subscriber, be on the lookout for all that intel that we get. Do that today. 75% off. Rivals 24 promo code. Autofill link in the description. But yes, Stratton, I think the Stratton era is going to be over swiftly after this game.
Yeah, at the very least, Kirk Ferentz was happy that Stratton did not turn the ball over. And, some of that was because Kaleb Johnson made that catch on that weird swing pass. But that was the closest that you were going to come to a turnover worthy play by Stratton. Like I think he threw maybe one ball into traffic, and even then, like it still got to the receiver barely. It was not a pickable throw. We'll say that. And so to that extent, Stratton did what Ferentz wanted, but that was a perfect example of how you can't sort of microwave competence at the QB position, especially with a first year walk on transfer Colorado State. Like Stratton was not set up for success this season, and and nobody in Iowa City would argue otherwise, right? Like nobody in Iowa City expected Stratton to be starting the Nebraska game. That was not how that QB room was set up. That was not anything that they had in mind. And even, as recently as a month ago, it wasn't even in the cards. That was a, set of circumstances and situations that, it, it was so absurd that after after the game that the home game that Kirk Ferentz was saying, he just basically threw his hands up when Linez, when he was talking about Linez's thumb injury. He's like, what else could happen? And it's sort of the second year in a row of a like, what else could happen for this team? And yet they're 18-6, guys, over the last 2 years in the regular season. 18-8 when you include the two losses at the end of last year. But I mean, that's remarkable. That is remarkable. And it again, it just goes back to them taking care of the little things, I would say.
Yeah, I think with Stratton, we saw what he could do against Maryland when the game plan was easy for him to follow, and when the running game was extremely effective. That was another 200-yard running game for Iowa. That takes so much pressure off a quarterback, makes things so much easier for them. Iowa could not run the ball last night. That was going to one of those games where to get anything going in the running game, Iowa needed to be able to be effective enough passing to force Nebraska to back off and keep the safeties out of the box essentially. And Stratton struggled to do that. They were just not a very effective game from him on that standpoint. To me, I think what we've seen from quarterback, especially this last month of the season, really only emphasizes the fact that Iowa really needs to go find at least one quarterback in the portal again this offseason. It's the quarterback play this year. Overall, the offense has definitely improved under Lester, and a lot of that comes down to the tremendously improved running game and just an all-timer season from Kaleb Johnson. I was still dead last in the Big Ten, passing the ball, and there has just got to be improvement in that front. And how much of that is scheme, how much of that is personnel, how much of that is more continuity after another year with Lester, etc. But I don't think anybody who's watched the quarterback play this year can say, "Oh yeah, Iowa is in good shape at that position." Like, there is work to be done there. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. They're definitely going to need to dip into the portal for another quarterback. Jimmy Sullivan coming in 25. He will be an early enrollee, but he will not be ready. Like that's unfair. Dylan Raiola is a rare a prospect in that regard, and we saw why a little bit last night. He missed some throws though too, that he probably should make. I think this was his first real cold game playing in because he is from the South, so that's a factor. But anyway, Iowa's quarterback conversation. Right now, Sullivan, um, Linez, Stratton, other Sullivan, Ryan Fitzgerald. Who knows if somebody's going to enter the portal between the three that are coming back. You got to have somebody that you believe can compete for that starting position with Brendan Sullivan. And I don't know that we've gotten any evidence that Marco Linez can do that right now. We shall see. What we hear continually from the staff is about year 3 is when it starts to click. If you believe Marco Linez can make it click in year 3, then maybe you've got your guy to compete with Sullivan. But I think ultimately this has to be something where you go out and get a guy who can compete and win the job and not be like they're like this. You want this, right? You want a guy who's better, who can maybe elevate the game of Sullivan if it comes down to it. So that'll be a conversation for another podcast in the near future and premium articles with intel from with intel regarding Iowa's plans in the portal. But one thing we have to talk about on this particular podcast before we get out of here is that one particular former portal quarterback was not recognized last night for senior night. Cade McNamara, listed on everything as a senior and as one who's graduating. And he, according to Kirk Ferentz, he was not announced. He did not run out on the field. Who knows if his parents were there? He opted to not be recognized on senior night. And for all of the rumors that have been out there, everything that we've heard that we talked about last week, Adam, if you needed anything to be a confirmation regarding what is true and what is not, I think last night was telling.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And on some level, it's too bad because I don't think anyone really wants a career to end the way that Cade McNamara's did, with him just probably making the right call, unfortunately, in saying, hey, I don't really want to do this, because so much of what we heard over the week, and I get that a lot of this is just the loudest and most negative fans. I know. But there was a lot of speculation about how McNamara was going to be treated by the fans coming out of the, for doing that senior day walk. And when that's even an open question to begin with, it and we're talking like, it's not like they had any trouble cheering for Spencer Petras. It's not like they had any trouble cheering for Nate Stanley or any, I mean, name any QB that's played for Iowa.
Or Jermari
So
Harris.
yeah, who was quite noticeably walking and not running. But yeah, like Jermari Harris was, if you look at that picture that Phil Parker tweeted of all the DBs around with the Heroes Trophy, Jamari's right there with them, smiling, and he's still a part of that team. He nobody ever questioned his loyalty as a Hawkeye, this, that. And yeah, I don't know how much of that is sort of self-inflicted by Cade McNamara. I'm not in his head. I'm not in his text messages. I don't know what those conversations are like between him and his coach. On some level, I hope he's okay. Because opting out of recognition is, oof, like, that's rough. That things have gone wrong. And Kirk was even like, yeah, man, he's had a rotten 3 years. Yeah, I agree. I get it. But also, Eliot, like you were saying, if you want confirmation of how things had been going in Iowa City, there you go. And also, let's just say it, McNamara was never voted captain again. And when he got benched against Northwestern, I had asked some of the players, and including a couple of the other captains, like, what do you think that this means for his captain status? And they're like, well, I think he should still be captain. Like Mason Richmond said, we didn't vote him captain because we thought he was the best quarterback in America. We did it for his leadership. And the fact that he slid off there too, that, like you said, Eliot, sort of tells you everything that you need to know. But also, the fact that Kirk didn't really take the easy shot at him, and he had a few opportunities. I think there is some empathy from Kirk for how poorly McNamara's Iowa career went, even if it's self-inflicted. Even if it's self-inflicted. And I would say it is. But yeah, I think everybody involved wishes that McNamara's career had gotten to the point where he could be celebrated for senior day. And Eliot, like I said on our last podcast, I had hoped for him personally, just for his own well-being, that he would be, treated like a hero and this and that. But it's clear that that wasn't in the cards. And it really does seem like there was no real impetus to get a happy ending out of this season from anybody involved, whether it's Cade, Kirk, captains, this, that. I think they had all recognized that this had run its course, but that's, man, that stinks for him. And there's no amount of NIL money that, makes up for feeling like crap about yourself, it's a sad reality of that situation. But yeah, I feel bad for everything involved in that. I don't even have a real hot take on this or that. It's sad to me. Ross, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just my big takeaway too, is that the whole thing is just a massive bummer. Like
Yeah.
nothing about it, there's no good angle here. Like the injuries, especially the concussions, the mental health side of things, just everything that's happened is just really depressing and unfortunate, and you know, bad decisions mixed in too, perhaps. And it's just, you know, everything. It's almost exactly 2 years now from when Iowa fans found out that McNamara was coming to Iowa out of the portal, I believe. And no one, I think, could have predicted that this is how that experience was going to turn out. And certainly no one would have wanted it to turn out this way. Just, the on-field play was, subpar, and the off-field stuff was unfortunate, and it's just hasn't been good. But I think you're right that it's, it just, everyone involved, I think, recognizes the need to turn the page at this point, and there's a need to move on and go in a different direction from everybody. So, for Cade, whatever he's dealing with, whatever he's feeling, I hope he's okay. I hope he's able to find, somewhere or something in the future where he's happier and doing better, because clearly this experience was not it. So,
Chances are he will gain another year of eligibility based on medical red shirt. And if I had to guess, he will be in the portal at 12:01 a.m. on December 9th. We shall see. We will follow that. We will keep you apprised again at iowa.rivals.com. Um, Speaking of quarterbacks, and this will wrap
Now,
up.
now, Eliot,
What?
and if people want that inside intel on HawkeyeBeacon.com, Iowa.rivals.com, but they're not subscribers yet, I mean, this must be a prohibitive cost for them to become subscribers. Is that correct, or is there a certain sale going on?
Actually, 75% off for the entire year.
What?
Um,
What?
if you missed it the first two times, thank you, Adam, for the reminder there. And speaking of which, we're gonna have intel on the loads of visitors that were there yesterday. By my count, 50 visitors on campus for Iowa recruits. One particular that was a transfer portal visitor. He's a D2 visitor. And again, we'll have intel on that. Peyton Falzone from Pennsylvania, who was there, a four-star quarterback. Though Iowa has a commit in the 26 class, and he is a 26 quarterback, he did make the trip. There's a 2027 with 20 offers. That's a quarterback. Jax DeJean made it to campus. Cooper Terwilliger, who's another 2027 four-star tight end on campus. Again, we're going to have all that intel there at iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. So stay tuned. Again, you're not a premium subscriber. You can do that today. Promo code Rivals24. That's all caps, Rivals24. If you don't want to worry about that promo code, autofill link right down there. Click it. One click, you're in. Sign up. We'd love to have you. So we will wrap it up there. We appreciate you tuning into this episode of HawkCast. And make sure you subscribe here on YouTube and Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Drop a like, drop a comment. Let us know what you're thinking after this game and going forward. Who should Iowa go after? What positions Iowa should go after in the portal? All that. We're going to have that coverage going forward as well. Don't miss this opportunity. 75% off. Click that autofill link. we'd love to have you. So, once again, folks, I am Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by Ross Binder and Adam Jacoby, and we see you next time.